Hello everyone, it's Matt here from Christopher Shore again. I'm of course here with James Tiller, and we are doing another video for you today, and a topic that's probably long overdue. We should have done this many months ago, even years ago. We have invited on a repeat guest today. You may remember Craig Bowling from our previous EPC chat, but Craig, his main probably area of expertise is he is our inventory clerk specialist company that we obviously get to go to your property before a tenant enters. Of course, if you've asked for an inventory, Craig and his team will go along. So we thought it'd be a good opportunity to catch up with him today and discuss inventories.
Indeed, yeah, there's lots to discuss about inventories. It's quite a broad area, Craig, as I'm sure you agree, but also an area which we found has been misunderstood. And with the costs of everything going up at the moment, there is an importance of having something to record what your property is like at the start of a tenancy. So, Craig, shall we just strip it all back and just explain what an inventory in a rental property actually is?
Yeah, absolutely, Stacey. Thanks for having me. So an inventory is a full condition report of the property before the tenancy starts. So it's usually carried out 24 to 48 hours before a tenancy. And we will go in and we will do a full list and condition of everything in the property. Now, there's a misconception with some owners. They think, well, it's a unfurnished property. What do I need an inventory for? We're not talking just about furnishings. Obviously, if a property is furnished, we would include that as well. But we're talking about the makeup of the property. So we use our own mantra to describe every room we go into throughout a property, and we follow that. So you'll get a written description of the doors, the windows, the ceiling, the light fitting. Every element, what we class as the fixtures and fittings that makes up that property, is included with a written description and backed up with high-res digital photography. We do this to make it clear and concise to everybody involved. Now, this inventory will go to you, the agent. It will go to the incoming tenant, and a copy will also go to the landlord. We try and use clear and concise language that explains exactly what we've seen. So if we just take a door as a broad example, let's just say it's a white painted door. We would describe it as a white painted wooden door with two silver colored handles and a silver colored turn lock on inside, for example. If there was something, what we would call, not necessarily wrong, but a dilapidation or some sort of fault with the door, we would list that on the end of each sentence. So we might say a door handle loose on inside, or maybe there's some nail holes from a previous fitting. This is included so that it's clear that that was how the property was received by this tenant coming in. So come at end of tenancy, he's not responsible, sorry, he or she is not responsible for the nail holes on the inside of the door because they were already there when the tenancy started. So the idea of an inventory is that we do a clear and concise report, including everything inside of the property, as well as any external parts of the property that are included in the tenancy, and that anybody can understand it relatively easily, even if English isn't their first language. Therefore, everybody knows the condition of the property. Hopefully they all agree on that condition, and that's what will then protect the property, the landlord, and the deposit moving forwards.
I think one of the key things with that is that the report is independently produced as well, isn't it? By using a clerk such as yourselves, there's no bias as to which way the condition might be interpreted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's really important for us as a company to be independent. So we don't favor the agent, the tenant, or the landlord. We are there, we treat every job as a new inventory, whether we've been to the property before, and we report on exactly what we see. And we try to do that as honestly and openly as possible. Because like I say, we're trying to protect multiple parties here. Now it's clear, I've got to make it clear, you don't have to use an independent third party to do an inventory. Some landlords like to do their own, and they are entitled to do that. But there are some advantages. First of all, like you say, it's an impartial, fair report. We're fair towards the tenant, the agent, the landlord. We, like I said, so we don't favor anybody. It's just a honest report of what we see and what we do. Being independent, we also are able to do some additional services while we're there that are included inside of our inventory. So a landlord, for example, might just do a basic description of what they know in their property. And they probably do a relatively good job because they're intimate with their properties. What they may not include is CO alarm and smoke alarm testing, as well as advising on correct siting of such alarms. So obviously we know there's legislation about smoke alarms in properties, and now we have legislation for CO alarms. Some landlords may know it, but I think, as we both know, some aren't aware of all the legislation, which is what us as a supplier and you as an agent are responsible for letting them know. We also give a basic, what we call an HHSRS overview. So if we see something that falls under the health and safety within a property, we will give you, the agent, a heads up on that. That allows you to go to your landlords and say, look, here's a problem in the property. Obviously, it's then up to them if they do anything about it. Hopefully, most of the time they do. But that offers you another level of protection. And again, it's offering that tenant the protection, because we don't want to move people into dangerous properties. It's not advisable for anybody. So they're just some of the extra things that we do inside of a standard inventory that are included. Going back to why it's important to use an independent, because obviously if a landlord does their own inventory, which, like I say, they are entitled to do, they could be very favorable towards themselves. They could be completely over the top in terms of their expectations. I mean, we have some landlords that don't accept fair wear and tear, even after a 2-3 year tenancy, which is, obviously isn't going to stand up at any sort of dispute, but that's what they are. So they tend to go either one way or the other. You get a very basic inventory, which is one piece of paper with a few squiggles on it, if you like, or something typed out, or to go over the top and what they list is not realistic. And some of their expectations in terms of what they would expect to be damaged isn't realistic. I mean, it's not new for old like it used to be. There's a whole myriad of different options there.
Yeah.
So using a third party eliminates that. It's someone who comes in, does a fair and honest report. And like I say, with any service and product, depending on who you use, there's good inventories, there's bad inventories, and there's in between inventories. I can only comment on the way that we tackle the inventory, but that's the main advantages of why you would use an independent.
I suppose when we talk about protections and protecting the landlord and their property investment and what have you, it's when it comes the inventory in itself comes to its fore, I suppose, when you come to assess the deposit at the end of the tenancy and any potential deposit claims, which will lead on to the next role, which would be the checkout inspection.
Yes.
And what the difference between the two of those type of reports are, because they're two very, very different reports. And we go on about the independent nature of it. One of the important things that you'll get whenever you go through, if you're unfortunate to have been through a deposit dispute, is that adjudicators will look at the body of evidence, and the body of evidence being an inventory at the beginning, a checkout report at the end. Can they make the assumption based on that is the condition of the property?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you say rightly, these reports protect the property, they protect the agent, they protect the landlord, they protect the tenant, they protect the deposit. All of them are contributing factors. All of the evidence goes towards protecting all of that. So the checkout report, which is your end of tenancy check. So the reason why some landlords get confused is because some people refer to the inventory as a check-in inventory, and some people refer to a checkout as a checkout inventory. Because the word inventory is in there twice, people can get a little bit muddled. We try and keep it clear. Inventory before somebody moves in, checkout once they vacate. The checkout is even more fundamental that it's an independent third party. Again, we'll be honest, landlords can do their own. Again, they're far more likely to be biased, especially if they're intimate with their properties, and they're going to feel, if they've come into a property that's been left in a bad way, they're going to feel it a lot more emotionally than us. We're going in and just doing a job. So the third party independence bit here is really important, and it's more essential. We will go in exactly the same as an inventory and do a independent, fair report, and it follows a similar format. So if we're using our own inventory, we will literally do a point-by-point check against our inventory on all the factors that we mentioned earlier, the mantra. So we will start with the door. Has anything changed? Is it still a white painted door with 2 silver colored handles with a turn lock on the inside? If the lock's hanging off, if the door's been damaged, split, maybe marked or dirty in some way, punched in, it happens, especially in the student properties, then this is what we're going to be listing on, because we are basically playing a very glorified game of spot the difference, but in a far more professional capacity. And it's this reporting that will determine what, if anything, will be deducted. Obviously, that goes back to you guys, and you liaise with your landlords and you decide what's fair to do that. Obviously, we do not get involved in deductions or allocating blame or suggesting amounts of money that should be taken off. We just do a report based on what we see compared to the inventory. So this is where a really good inventory is fundamental, because if you don't have a detailed inventory going in, then it's harder to do a checkout on the way out. So this is why we use our mantra. We obviously always prefer to do checkouts against our own inventories, because everybody understands the format throughout the team. You follow the mantra in the same order in each room. You've got a written description of every component and the photography to back it up. Whereas other inventory companies will do it differently. And some of them use apps which just produce colored dots on the pictures, and you have to press the dot to find out what dilapidation is. I don't find that clear and concise. Perhaps if I used it on a daily basis like they do, then maybe it would be. But certainly I look at it from the perspective of, I'm going to look at it at the perspective as the landlord may not know what a good inventory looks like or should have in. The tenant may not be experienced with this. So I want to give them a report that they can read, makes perfect sense to them. If they've got any queries, they can look at it straight away in the pictures, and they should be able to marry the two up. And it's the same with the checkout. You get more disputes with a checkout than you do with an inventory, which is because there's usually a financial deduction being made. And certainly we found with landlords, since the tenant fee ban, they're far more sensitive to the checkout report and the deductions than they used to be, because they've incurred more costs. We understand why it's happened. Whether it's right or wrong is another matter. So therefore, they're going to look at the report a lot harder. And if anything is not as they see it, they're far more likely to bring that up with you, the agent. But we want to make sure the report is obvious to anybody reading it what we're saying. So on a checkout report, if it's saying there was a window cracked in the downstairs toilet, they want to go, yep, okay, it wasn't cracked on the way in, because on the inventory it's listed as fine. And bearing in mind, going back to the inventory, the way we do our inventories is, once we produce the report and send it to you, the agent, you then put it through the Verismart delivery system, which sends it on to the tenant. And this is a digital date stamped body of evidence, if you like, that the tenant has received the report. They've opened it, they've had a look at it. They can't change it. They can put their own comments and pictures should they need to. But what's most important is they are signing off the condition of that report based on how it's been produced to them. So they may have put a few notes at the end saying, oh, well, we found an extra tile cracked in the bathroom, or something like this. Or most of the time they don't make any comments. So they are signing off the report as they've received it, which is what protects everyone come tenancy, because this is what they've accepted. This is what they said, yes, this is what we're happy with. This inventory states that this is the condition of the property, and we are acknowledging that we agree as a tenant. So that's another advantage of the way we do it, because then come the checkout, it should reduce the disputes. Because if we're saying window is cracked and it wasn't cracked on the way in, and they've signed the document to say it wasn't cracked on the way in, there shouldn't really be much of a dispute. It's happened during the tenancy, and unless it's some sort of external accident that's happened with, we had an incident where a conservatory window got broken, where they were mowing the lawn and a stone flew out, and it was the gardener who did it. So obviously that was that. But otherwise, it's fairly obvious it's happened through the tenancy. It should be their responsibility.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on service, because that was something that popped into my head when you said something earlier. So a lot of people might not be aware of how we kind of operate the inventories. It's not, like the old days, maybe printing out a bit of paper, and a lot of it is being able to prove delivery of it and retain copies of it. So I guess sometimes maybe when a landlord provides an inventory, You know, it may not be copied, or they might lose that inventory over time. You know, the good thing about your system in particular is the way you deliver the inventory, how it records when it was delivered, it records when it's opened. If it wasn't open during obviously that 7-day period, it will send reminders to the tenant through that process, and then at the end of that process it will close and will send us, and I assume as well the tenant notification that the period to make any amendments is now closed. So it's quite a good ring fence system with lots of proof and things you can refer back to that you probably wouldn't get from a landlord who's providing their own tenancy.
No, absolutely. So like I say, most landlords would produce it as they would type it up on Microsoft Word, something like that, and print it out, get the tenants to sign it, and then if they've got a good filing system, it goes into their filing cabinet and it stays in there unless they need it. The problem with that is it's not easily accessible for everybody. So the tenant needs to have a copy. If there's an agent involved, they need to have a copy. If the landlord needs to be able to have a copy, if we've done the inventory, we need to be able to have a copy. So obviously our online calendar system stores everything indefinitely. So we can pull back any report that we've ever done at a property going back 20 years or something.
Yeah, and we use that. We do. If we're like, okay, we haven't got the copy for whatever reason, we know they moved in on the 20th of May 2018. We can just go back through your calendar, find the appointment, and find the attachment. We know which inventory clerk went. We've got access to their mobile number. It's a good system for that, and no one's perfect at filing. But to be able to go on digitally and go back 2-3 years, as long as you knew what the move-in date was, because we do our inventories pretty much 99 times out of 100 on the day of the move-in, so we know it was done. And of course, you do those other services for us, which like checking the carbon monoxide, checking the smoke alarm, also taking meter readings. We didn't touch on as part of that as well. So you kindly take the meter readings and record those with serial numbers, MPAN numbers, if you can find it, the water meter reading, but they're quite hard sometimes. But all of that obviously is recorded and accessible, and we can go back, like you said, all those years, and it's very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, meter readings, that's a good one. That's something else that's just, it's considered standard on any inventory and checkout report. The system is designed to make your lives as easy as possible. I mean, what you have in terms of from the customer side of the calendar, we have a slightly more advanced search. We can recall anything by property and it will show us the history if we've been there. So for example, let's say you took over a property 5 years ago, but before we used to go there for a different agent, we have everything in the property history all stored in one place. And the tenant delivery system that we talked about earlier is designed to make it easier for you again. It's a digitally stamped trail of evidence of everything of that job. So it shows when you booked it as the agent, when we completed it as the supplier, when you received the report, when the tenant receives the report, they get the SMS reminder text. I think they get a 3 and 5 day reminder after the initial first day email and text to say, look, your inventory's here. And if they choose not to open it, or if they choose not to do anything with it, it signs off automatically. And again, that's considered they've acknowledged, well, they've not taken the opportunity to do it. So that's how it's signed off.
Yeah,
most of them do download it and at least look at it, and some will put comments and some won't. But either way, anything that's done is all stored. So when we come to do the checkout at the end of the tenancy, we'll have our report that we supply to you, any tenants' comments if they've made them, all on the same report, and at the end we have the digital date stamp of everything that's happened on that journey, all in one place, and it's stored.
We can also, in rare circumstances, offer an extension. So, for example, if a tenant's been on holiday and their move-in started and they've then gone away for a few days and they need an extra 24 hours or 3 days, whatever, we can do that through the system as well. So, again, it's flexible and fair when it needs to be if people request more time.
No, absolutely. That was a feature that came in after the initial delivery system for that exact reason. The problem arose where someone had gone away, missed their 7 days. So, the grant extension option was added.
Yeah, I think there's lots of benefits to all of these things, and I think that the date stamping of the photos is another particularly important feature, because having a digital photo, we've had it with disputes in the past where we've had to send off digital photos to DPS or whichever the body is, and but they're not date stamped. They could have been taken whenever, and it takes a bit of a guess as to when it might have been taken for the adjudicator, who's independent, who's literally just basing their decision on paper or electronic documents, whatever. What's the easiest way for them to understand the situation? Well, date stamp photos, date stamp reports, all these things all come crucially into that, and that's the protection aspect, which I think is really the most important thing with having inventories and checkout reports done to this standard, and why we have always been encouraging for landlords to consider doing it. Of course, you don't have to do it. Landlords don't have to do it, but if you want a professional report, then this is the way to do it.
Well, I think one of the key things, obviously mentioned in our previous video, Craig, which you might have seen, which is about rent insurance, is a lot of those policies actually do specify that an inventory has to be done. I think otherwise it's not that they can't sign off on a policy, but they cannot provide the full range of their services, i.e. chasing dilapidations and things, if an inventory wasn't provided as part of a rent guarantee insurance. So, they kind of, everything goes hand in hand in agency, doesn't it? So it's evidential based. It's having date stamps and proofs and non-bias information, but equally, it does kind of affect other things along the chain of being a landlord. So, we see them as vitally important. And I've always said inventories are, almost as important or second most important next to the AST itself. Because you and I have both worked in the industry long enough to have seen when it goes wrong, it can go dramatically wrong, and those costs spiral.
Absolutely. But like I was just saying to you off camera a moment ago, I'm helping a landlady at the moment who has been very successful with letting properties for, I think she said 10 years without ever using inventories. But she's now just had a bad experience where she's had a lot of damage done. She's asked to keep the deposit. They've said no. And she's losing because she has no inventory. I mean, all I would say, my advice to all landlords would be get an inventory, whether that's through us or a different company. Get yourself something preferably third party. Like I said, it doesn't have to be, but it is a preferred method because it just proves it's impartial, and get yourself that level of protection. Obviously, be aware that within the market, like any service or product, there are different levels of an inventory. There are some that are done with apps that will give you a lot of pictures and clever digital hotspots and things like that, but don't give you the written description. Our way is by far not the quickest way of doing an inventory, but I am confident that it is one of the best ways of doing an inventory, which is why I think we are one of the biggest agents in this country, and why we have Verismart all over the country. But definitely, as a landlord, get yourself something to protect yourself, because you'll get caught out at some point and you will regret it. It's very hard going in front of TDS, My Deposits or something like that with no inventory. And we partner with My Deposits, and they give us bits of information and the inside track on things. And what you were saying about date stamps on pictures, so when I started doing this 8 years ago or something, everybody wanted a date stamp on the picture. My Deposits actually say now they like it, but it's not as important as it used to be, because as long as the pictures are embedded within a digital PDF, they can obviously be seen from their property information on the picture when they were taken. So we had an incident on a checkout where I think it was a previous supplier supplied some pictures, and you could clearly see something wasn't right. The rooms had changed colours, some of the fixtures had changed, and what they'd actually done is they'd put a date stamp onto some old pictures to try and cover up. I can't remember the exact details. I think they'd forgotten to take pictures on the inventory, so they used the previous checkout pictures and put you can get an app for a date stamp on your phone or on your computer and put it on afterwards. And obviously, after a bit of looking into it, it was obvious what had happened. So a date stamp is good, but it's not foolproof.
No.
But the property information of a picture embedded inside of a secure PDF, which is how we supply it, My Deposits, certainly, who we speak to quite often, they're very happy with the way we supply. They do say that they don't see a great deal of our reports make it as far as the disputes stage, but if they do, they have very, very good conversion rates of being successful in protecting the landlord, or protecting whoever is in the right, shall we say?
Yeah.
Because we do know there are landlords out who will take the mick, shall we say, a little bit, or try to go for too much money, or be unfair towards the tenant. And like I say, we're doing this talk to educate landlords and say, look, get an inventory, but we are talking about an independent report. If a tenant happens to see this, we're looking to protect you just as much.
It's independence, like you say. It's a non-biased report, and that's when we get involved to obviously mediate a fair resolution for all, obviously representing our landlord, but as you say, if it went further, we have to be realistic of the adjudicator will then completely take the decision out of anyone's hands, and that is the final say. So I think these are important because it gives us a better start in negotiating any deductions from the deposit, early doors, quickly, so everyone gets their share of whatever money is left quickly, so they can all move on. Because of course tenants want their deposit back, or whatever proportion of their deposit back, as fast as possible, because it's expensive to move, and equally for landlords, they need to rent their property. So it benefits no one to go through a muddy dispute claim, when by using this sort of thing, it just makes everything a little bit more black and white, and a less grey, and easier to negotiate, basically.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think there's some really important messages with that, and I think that feel very BBC here in the fact that there are lots of different options available for people, but having a professional inventory is definitely something which we would recommend. And
you guys have been great. I mean, we've been when you crossed over different regions, Craig, how long ago is that now? Is that 2019?
3 years that we've been working directly together, and it's been
really, really good. And obviously, if we're in a dilemma and we call you, often you'll bend over backwards to accommodate. So a thank you for that. But that obviously then in turn, benefits our customers. If we have to move quickly, if someone wants to move in earlier, you've always been there to accommodate us. So again, we've got a very good service there. So thank you very much, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us again, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Craig.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.